Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark is the first film in the Indiana Jones franchise, and it probably should have been the last. I just watched this movie for the first time yesterday, and it was not very good. The movie opens with a pretty cool scene of them walking through the jungle and eventually finding a temple where Indy is trying to steal an artifact. And I actually like this scene a lot, but there are still some pretty silly things that happen in this scene, starting with this iconic part. So his plan is to quickly replace the artifact with this bag of sand so that the temple thinks it's the same thing and none of the traps go off. So what does he do? He takes a handful of sand from the bag and just pours it out onto the ground, a whole entire handful. And then for some reason he didn't think that maybe it was a bad idea to lift up the artifact before putting the sand down. And then Indy gets betrayed and he has to get out of the exit door before it closes. And this is your typical main character trying to get through a door before it closes in the nick of time. Except in this movie, the door sounds like it's closing and it looks like it's closing, but it's never actually closing. So keep in mind, this is where the door is when Indy first jumps over the gap. 18 seconds and the door is in the exact same spot as it was 18 seconds ago. That is ridiculous and probably the worst case of this I've ever seen. Cool iconic boulder scene. Now overall I really like this scene. I feel like it captures the magic of Indiana Jones and what I would expect it to be like. I haven't seen that many Spielberg movies, but the ones I have seen, I feel like they don't really have much of a deep meaning, not much of a message behind them. It's more about how good they are from a filmmaking standpoint and if they can make you feel tense and if they're nerve-wracking or not. And this movie, it's not about nitpicking the action scenes, but when the movie is about stuff like that and it's about the action scenes, and when there are flaws like this in every single scene, it takes you out of it and there's nothing to really back it up because it's about these scenes. What follows is pretty much just a 5-minute scene explaining what's going to happen for the rest of the movie. Next we're introduced to Marion, who is introduced as a really cool character. I just really hope she doesn't become just a whiny side character who becomes just a prize for Indy to earn at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert, that's exactly what happens. So if Marion has had the medallion for years, how come it took the Nazis this long to find her? They also arrive right as Indy arrives, even though they've had years where they could have found her, and they arrive at the same time as each other. And then what follows is this awful action scene where it could have ended right where it began, but instead Indy uses his whip instead of just shooting them on the spot, and then takes out his gun once everyone's all set up and ready to fight. And here, Tote tells his man to shoot both Indy and his other man, even though his other man is in complete control of his fight with Indy. They could just shoot Indy. There's no reason to shoot both unless you want him to betray you. And this guy just stands still smiling, waiting for Indy to punch him in the face for some reason. This guy points a gun at Indy for 4 seconds, even though he's been trying to kill him this whole time. But anyway, moving on. This guy is so cute and probably the best part of the movie. But now let's skip ahead to when he dies, because everything in between kind of drags. Them running through the town is kind of lame, but at least it has some charm and some sense of adventure. They spend almost the rest of the movie in this desert trying to find the Ark, and it just doesn't feel much like Indiana Jones to me. It doesn't feel much like an adventure. The opening scene felt a lot like Indiana Jones in an adventure, but this scene kind of lost that feeling for me personally. But anyway, they continue searching for the Ark, and they find this hidden door, and when they open it up, they see a bunch of snakes on the floor. But wait, apparently we weren't supposed to see that there were snakes on the floor, even though it was very clear the room is lit up perfectly fine. So they throw down a torch onto the floor that lights up literally nothing, and we see the light from the lightning lighting up the snakes anyway, and now they notice it. There are a lot of moments, but I would say this one where Marion puts on a dress and sits down for a meal is probably the one where she becomes officially useless and just something to motivate Indy. Now this scene is actually good. They use one of Marion's characteristics that were established earlier in the movie to have her get the upper hand, or at least think she does, and they do it in a way that creates a lot of tension. And it's actually really refreshing, because one of the problems I have with this movie is it being about the tension, but them not doing a very good job of creating the tension, as we've seen in some very silly action scenes earlier, even though the movie is about those scenes. So Indy seems to have gotten over his fear of snakes, which was set up in the very opening scene of the movie, I guess to have shock value at the beginning of the scene, and now they're just ignoring it. They didn't think that maybe it was a bad idea to drop Indy back down his whip, even though they had it on the surface, practically just giving him a way out for no reason. Even he's confused by this. And then we have our least nerve-wracking fight scene of the entire movie. Even sped up, it doesn't seem very urgent. I can't believe this is real. How are there Nazis all around them, and none of them saw Indy and Marion get off the plane and run away in the wide open? The entire car scene is pretty cool, but specifically when Indy climbs under the car and all the way back around to the front. This is also a pretty good scene. At this rate, the movie will continue to get better and better, and the ending might make up for it. Oh yeah, we'll get there. And we've arrived. So the Nazis open the Ark and get killed by it, making Indiana Jones, his entire involvement in this story, meaning nothing. What impact did he have on this? It would have gone the same exact way if he was not in the story. The Nazis would have found the Ark and opened it and been killed by it. How do you write a story and have your main character not have any impact on it whatsoever? It makes no sense. And then for Indy and Marion to survive this, all they do is close their eyes, and this is never explained in the movie. And you could say that it's part of the mystery of the Ark, and that's fine. That could be good if it's set up earlier in the movie, if something is said about it earlier to set it up. You have to explain why these characters are doing the things they're doing, because as of right now, it's just a deus ex machina. Overall, Indiana Jones had a lot of potential, and there were some really good moments in this movie that made me feel like I was on an adventure, but ultimately it just fell short, and maybe it just didn't age very well, or maybe I'm just delusional.